A young cop, a black man, picking cereal in a supermarket. Then suddenly, hands up, drop it. I said freeze, gun drawn, right there in aisle 7, between yogurt cups and granola bars. No theft, no threat, just skin. The man didn't shout, didn't panic. He simply said, "You're making a big mistake." The officer growled, "I don't care who you are." But maybe he should have, because the man he just pulled a gun on was a senior agent with the Federal Integrity Unit and a close friend of the police chief. What about your state? Could this happen at your local grocery store? Welcome to Mr. 7 Stories. If you believe justice shouldn't depend on skin color, hit like, subscribe, and follow for more. Now, let's dive into the story that shook an entire town. The screech of shopping cart wheels dragging across supermarket tile echoed faintly beneath the soft hum of weekend sale announcements over the loudspeaker. Fluorescent lights stretched along the ceiling of Jean's Corner Market, casting a cold, sterile glow down each aisle, offering no warning of the storm about to break in aisle 7, the cereal and yogurt section. Malcolm Darnell Ford, 46 years old, stood tall, composed, his salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed, black leather shoes shining. He leaned forward, examining the ingredient label on a box of low-sugar cereal, the exact kind his wife, Desiree, had asked for earlier that morning. He wore a light khaki jacket over simple jeans, one hand resting on a half-full cart. He looked like any other man enjoying a quiet Saturday afternoon in Bridgetown Heights. But to Officer Logan R. Maddox, 25 years old, fresh out of the State Police Academy, recently transferred from River Glen County to join the Bridgetown Police Department, that image of normal rang alarms. From the far end of the aisle, Maddox approached, his right hand hovering close to the sidearm at his hip. His face was rigid, his eyes full of suspicion. He watched Malcolm like a predator tracking prey, waiting for the slightest sign of danger. "Hey, you there. Stop right there." The voice cut through the air, dry, commanding. Shoppers nearby froze. A few jumped. Malcolm turned, visibly confused. "Can I help you, officer?" His voice was low, calm, controlled. "I said stop." Maddox stepped closer, yanking his Glock 17 from its holster and leveling it with both hands. "Hands up." I said put your hands up. The air inside the crowded store turned heavy as stone. A few distant screams pierced the silence. A child began to wail from a nearby shopping cart. Shoppers scattered like waves, splitting down the aisle, backing away toward either end. Malcolm slowly raised his hands to shoulder height. His expression didn't show panic, but deep beneath it simmered a quiet rage, packed into every steady breath. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm buying groceries for my wife. This is a supermarket, and I live in this town." Maddox tightened his grip on the weapon, eyes locked on the middle-aged man, now standing between shelves of oatmeal and granola bars. "You look suspicious. You're acting weird. Looks to me like you're trying to steal something." A naked accusation, baseless, unprovoked, rooted in nothing but the color of his skin. The words stabbed Malcolm like a blade. But this wasn't new. Only this time, there was a gun involved. And it was happening in the very town he was born in. He was a senior agent with the FIU, the Federal Integrity Unit, a man who had gone toe-to-toe with international cartels, thwarted terror plots, faced down death more times than he could count. And he knew better than anyone, sometimes a gun isn't just a weapon. It's a trigger for tragedy. "Officer," Malcolm said, voice like stone, "you're making a serious mistake. And you're pointing that weapon at a man you know absolutely nothing about." Maddox growled, gun still raised. "I don't care who you are. All I see is a black man lurking around in a supermarket, and I have the right to question that." That was the verdict. No evidence needed. Delivered by prejudice alone. The supermarket remained frozen in place. An elderly couple cowered behind the ice cream freezer. A young woman hid behind the bread counter, phone trembling in her hands as she secretly recorded everything. Malcolm Darnell Ford stayed motionless, hands raised. But in his mind, the reel of his life played in reverse, decades of service flashing back. Not in a tactical hallway of a federal building. Not in a high-stakes raid on organized crime. But here, inside Jean's Corner Market, facing a rookie cop whose hand shook, not from danger, but from bias. Malcolm was no ordinary man. He was a seasoned agent with the FIU, the Federal Integrity Unit, where he had spent nearly 20 years confronting threats far beyond anything this town's officers had ever seen. He'd led operations dismantling organized crime. He'd helped secure national intelligence. He'd stood down real weapons, far more dangerous than prejudice. But none of it could stop a gun now pointed at him in his own hometown because of the color of his skin. And now, home for a short leave after a long mission, Malcolm stood between the same shells he grew up shopping in, humiliated and threatened by a man who didn't know him. Or more accurately, didn't care to. I'm a federal agent. I've served this country for nearly 20 years, Malcolm wanted to shout. He wanted to rip through the invisible curtain wrapped around him. But he didn't shout. He didn't panic. This is your last warning. Maddox barked. Hands up, higher. And don't try anything clever. Malcolm now faced a question he had spent his entire career avoiding. Was it time to use who he truly was, just to survive? But right then, from the far end of the aisle, Marcus Tillman, 29 years old, grocery clerk, who had heard stories about Malcolm from his mother, stepped between them. He didn't make a reckless move. No sudden charge. No shouting. He simply raised his hands, walked slowly, and called out loud. Officer Maddox. I know him. That's Mr. Malcolm. He was honored at the Lincoln Creek Church Spring Festival 3 years ago. You're pointing a gun at the kindest man in this entire town. Maddox glanced over for just a split second. And in that second, Malcolm spoke quickly. I'm reaching for my phone. Slowly. Right hand. Eyes on you. No threat. But I'm calling someone who can end this right now. Who? Maddox growled, his voice cracking. Chief Vernon Blake, Malcolm replied, calm, steady. My close friend, and your direct superior. A cold shiver shot down Maddox's spine, and for the first time during the standoff, his hand began to tremble. A few shoppers still hid behind the shelves, peeking only when no shot had been fired. The rest of Jean's Corner Market had fallen into dead silence, except for the soft hum of the freezer units and the ragged breaths of the young officer. Officer Logan Maddox stood across from Malcolm Ford, gun still raised, but his hand no longer steady. Sweat beaded on Maddox's brow, slipping down to his earpiece. He had never been in a situation like this, where power was slipping away from him, inch by inch. Malcolm, with the composure of a veteran FIU agent, didn't yell, didn't cry out like so many others forced to stare down a barrel because of their skin. Instead, he did the one thing prejudice never expects. He reached for his phone, slowly, deliberately. His right hand moved down, still in Maddox's line of sight. Malcolm pulled out his iPhone from his coat pocket. No sudden moves, no gestures that could be misread. Every motion measured, precise, like a tactical operation. He tapped the screen. A name appeared, Blake, Chief of Police. He hit call. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. And then a deep, familiar voice came through the speaker. Ford, you're calling me at this hour. I know that tone. Talk to me. Maddox froze. His head turned from Malcolm to the phone, eyes locked on the screen. He no longer heard the AC hum, no longer saw the people around him. All he heard was that voice. Firm, clear, unmistakable. The voice of the one man who made him nervous the day he stood at attention during roll call. Vern, Malcolm said, I'm at Jean's Corner Market. Aisle 7. One of your new officers just pulled a gun on me without cause. He suspects me because I don't look like someone shopping for cereal. A dead silence followed. Then Chief Blake's voice turned to ice. Name of the officer? Logan Maddox. On the other end, something dropped, a thud like a coffee mug hitting the floor. Then Blake's voice returned, faster now, with barely restrained fury. Do not move. Don't do anything. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Malcolm ended the call. He looked at Maddox, now pale as chalk, eyes wide in panic, lips twitching without forming words. His hand lowered the gun half an inch, then lifted it again, unsure of what to do next. You really know him? Maddox stammered. I don't just know him, Malcolm replied, his voice sharp as a scalpel. I saved his life during a gun smuggling case in Southlake, back in 2009. It's all on record. Maddox swallowed hard. The fear was no longer about the black man standing before him. It was about the truth. The automatic doors of Jean's Corner Market slid open with a soft beep, like always. But this time, the entire store held its breath. Chief Vernon Blake, 48, entered. No uniform, just a crisp white dress shirt, buttoned to the collar. A silver fitbit wrapped around his left wrist. But his eyes carried a storm rolling just behind his brow. No sirens, no backup, just him, striding through the aisles with the weight of judgment in every step. Customers moved aside, not out of fear, but because they could feel something was deeply wrong. When he reached aisle 7, he didn't need to ask. The scene said everything. At one end stood Malcolm Ford, calm, right hand lowering his phone, eyes steady. At the other, Officer Logan Maddox, white as a sheet, gun still awkwardly floating in his hand, like he'd forgotten how to holster it. Chief Blake didn't stop between them. He walked straight to Malcolm. That gesture alone said everything. "Ford," he said softly, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. "You all right?" Malcolm nodded, his voice low. "Physically, yeah. Dignity? Can't say the same." Blake gave his shoulder a quiet squeeze, then turned like a thunderclap toward Maddox. No shouting, no screaming, but his voice struck like a gavel in a courtroom. "Officer Maddox, explain to me what the hell is going on here." Maddox swallowed. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Blake stepped closer, only 2 feet away now. His eyes dropped to the pistol still in Maddox's trembling hand. Then came the order, slow and firm. "Surrender your weapon. Now." Maddox hesitated, half a second too long, and Blake's jaw tightened. "I'm not asking. I'm ordering. Gun, badge, radio. You're officially suspended, effective immediately." A nearby cashier gasped behind her hand at the word suspended. A young man, still recording, couldn't believe his eyes. The police chief was disciplining his own officer, right here in the middle of a supermarket aisle, for everyone to see. Maddox's hands trembled as he held out his gun. He nearly dropped the Glock 17 onto the floor. Then came the badge from his breast pocket, and finally his radio. Chief Blake took each item, gun, badge, radio, slipping them into the pockets of his coat without saying another word. Then he pointed toward the door. "Go back to the station. Wait for me in the office. You are not to speak to anyone about this." And Maddox, the young officer, turned, lips trembling. "Why, yes, sir." "Start praying. Pray the store's security footage doesn't have audio." At that, Malcolm raised an eyebrow. Blake didn't know it yet, but the footage wasn't just visual. Several customers, including the college student with headphones, had been live streaming the entire thing, start to finish. Maddox turned and walked away, but his back no longer stood straight. He moved like a man under indictment, each step pressing down like a charge around his neck. Chief Blake turned back to Malcolm. Neither spoke for a long beat, but they both knew this wasn't over. Just 36 hours after the incident at Jean's Corner Market, the Bridgetown Heights Police Department had become the center of statewide attention. Though Chief Vernon Blake had handled the situation swiftly, he knew the deeper fix wasn't in the aisles of a grocery store. It was in the files of an internal investigation. Blake submitted an immediate request to the FIU Office of Review, the Federal Integrity Unit's Oversight Division, demanding an emergency inquiry into the conduct of Officer Logan Maddox, 25, a probationary rookie under his command. And by Monday morning, the investigators arrived. Agent Delphine Rook, head of FIU's Public Ethics Division, a black woman from New Jersey with over 30 years investigating misconduct, walked into the main conference room of the precinct. She carried a thick case folder. Her voice needed no microphone. "This investigation will proceed under full federal standards," she said, eyes locking on every unit commander and HR representative in the room. "We don't care about uniforms. We don't care about years of service. And we damn sure don't care about personal relationships." The store surveillance system, upgraded just last year, had recorded every moment in aisle 7. From the very first glance Maddox threw at Malcolm Ford, to every step closer, the drawn weapon, the shouted commands, and the bone-deep calm of the man who should have been greeted, not targeted. But that wasn't the only evidence. Marcus Tillman, the food clerk, submitted a separate audio file. It came from a chest mic he typically used for stockroom paging. He hadn't realized it was still live during the incident, but the device had captured 42 straight minutes of audio. In that recording, Maddox's voice was clear. They always lurk like nothing's going on. Better to handle it before something disappears off the shelf. And then Malcolm's reply, "I live here. I'm just picking cereal for my wife." Followed by Maddox again, quieter but unmistakable. "Black, sneaky, slow. I don't need another reason." The Federal Review team sat in stunned silence. The chill in the room didn't come from the AC. It came from a truth too sharp to deny. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate racial profiling. Tasha Elridge, the 21-year-old college student who filmed the incident, was also called in to testify. She brought with her a copy of the live stream, now shared more than 40,000 times across the community. As the footage replayed, her fear was visible. You could hear her heartbeat pounding through the phone's mic. And the quiet words she kept whispering into the camera. "He's just shopping. Oh God, please don't let anything happen." 3 days later, the preliminary report from the FIU was released. The findings were stark. Officer Maddox committed a severe breach of professional ethics, engaged in repeated acts of racial discrimination, used unnecessary force against an unarmed civilian, attempted to abuse authority to assert personal dominance, demonstrated lack of cooperation and honesty in his initial statement. At the end of the briefing, Chief Blake stood up quietly. No statement, no speech. He simply said, "This system needs cleaning. And today we start from the inside out." On Thursday morning, the third-floor assembly room at the Bridgetown Heights Police Department was sealed earlier than usual. No sirens, no press, no public announcements. But inside, the fluorescent lights were already on, and the disciplinary board of the Internal Affairs Division was ready to receive a name that, by all measures, shouldn't have appeared there so soon into his career. Logan R. Maddox, age 25, entered the hearing room, his face freshly shaved, his tie slightly crooked, his eyes vacant. Beside him stood a lawyer appointed by the local police union, not to exonerate, but to mitigate. Across the table sat 3 officials. Chief Vernon Blake, chair of the board. Agent Delphine Rook, representing the FIU Office of Review. Lieutenant Jalen Reddick, assigned as a neutral observer. On the table sat a folder nearly 2 inches thick, stacked with reports, witness statements, surveillance footage, Tasha Elridge's live stream, and the 42-minute audio recording from Marcus Tillman's chest mic. Chief Blake opened the session. "Officer Maddox, we'll allow you to speak shortly. But first, the representative from FIU will present the findings." Agent Delphine Rook rose. Her gaze never left Logan. "After thorough review of all submitted evidence, we find that Officer Logan Maddox committed multiple violations of fundamental law enforcement standards, including use of excessive force against a non-threatening civilian, racially motivated language and discriminatory behavior, abuse of authority to assert personal control, dishonesty in the official incident report, failure to fully cooperate with the federal investigation." Rook delivered the words with precision. Nothing more, nothing less. Then, turning to Chief Blake, she stated clearly, "Given the severity of these infractions, the FIU recommends the highest form of disciplinary action, immediate termination, with a nationwide bar from future employment in any law enforcement agency." No one objected. No one interrupted. Maddox's attorney stood, his voice measured and soft. "My client is young, lacking experience. He acted wrongly, yes, but without intent to cause serious harm. We ask the board to consider rehabilitation instead of ending a law enforcement career at the age of 25. Logan tried to speak for himself. His voice was choked, uncertain, barely audible. I just thought he looked strange. I was afraid he might do something. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." Chief Blake didn't answer right away. He sat still for a few seconds longer, then unfolded a typed page in front of him. His voice wasn't cold, but there was no space left for tears. "Mr. Maddox, I once hoped that young officers like you would represent a new generation of policing, one that doesn't judge by skin tone, one that doesn't act from fear. But in that grocery store, you didn't represent the law. You represented bias. He lifted his head, eyes steady and clear. The board is unanimous. Officer Logan Maddox is hereby terminated, effective immediately. A federal notice barring your return to law enforcement will be filed today. Logan lowered his head. This time, he had nothing left to say. When Logan Maddox stepped out of the disciplinary hearing that afternoon, the autumn sun spilled down over the back lot of the Bridgetown Heights Police Department. But to Maddox, the sunlight felt like a cold farewell, the quiet burial of a dream. His badge was already confiscated, his system access revoked within 30 minutes of a verdict. And at a desk inside the FIU Office of Review, a formal federal notice was being typed up. Logan R. Maddox, terminated for gross ethical misconduct and confirmed racial discrimination. Barred from employment in any federal, state, or local law enforcement agency. But even as the door was closing, Maddox's attorney played one last card. The following morning, in the public intake office on the first floor, the attorney submitted a petition requesting a follow-up hearing, arguing, Mr. Maddox's actions were not premeditated. They were the result of panic, immaturity, and insufficient training. A special session was reopened Friday afternoon. It held no legal weight over the prior ruling, but it gave Maddox one final chance to speak. Malcolm Ford did not attend. He declined the invitation, instead submitting a one-page written statement. I have no interest in hearing another apology from a man who feels no remorse. If a police officer's actions can be dismissed as reckless, then does my life come with a refund if taken by a mistake? I don't demand honor. I demand justice. And justice should not come with a probation period. In the hearing room, Maddox, no longer in uniform for the first time, sat facing the board. No more defense. No more evasion. I'm sorry, he said. I just want one more chance. Chief Blake responded with only 4 words. Not from us. Maddox stared at the file in front of him, where one bold red line read, Recommendation, irrevocable termination, ethical disqualification level, Tier 5. The last card had been played, and it wasn't enough to change the outcome of a game long decided. 1 week after Logan Maddox was officially terminated from the Bridgetown Heights Police Department, life in the small town moved on. Cars still lined up outside the old bakery on Lincoln Street. Kids still kicked soccer balls behind the church every Friday afternoon. But no one in town looked at patrolling officers the same way again. As for Malcolm Darnell Ford, age 46, he remained in the small mahogany house at the end of Ashbury Drive, once his parents' home. He didn't go on TV. He turned down interviews from national outlets. And he certainly didn't become a face of any movement. But on a quiet Saturday afternoon, at the Lincoln Creek Community Center, when the town council held an open forum on community police relations, Malcolm showed up. No suit, no badge, just a plain gray shirt, khaki pants, and a steady gaze. The same gaze that once made a drawn gun hesitate. I'm not here to talk about me, Malcolm began. I'm here to speak for those who never got to call the police chief, who didn't have a friend in the department, who didn't have a camera or a live stream. They're the reason I can't stay silent. The room fell into stillness. We can't ask the public to trust a system if those handed the badge aren't held accountable. No one is born suspicious because of skin color, and no one should fear for their life just buying cereal in the town they were born. Tears welled in the eyes of many elders in the crowd, people who had lived through decades where silence meant survival. But today, they were hearing a voice speaking not with rage, but with truth. Chief Vernon Blake sat in the back of the room, silently observing. He said nothing, because he knew every word Malcolm spoke was something he could never say himself. Not because he didn't care, but because he had never lived in that skin, never had a gun pointed at him for choosing the wrong grocery aisle. Days later, the town council passed a new resolution. All newly hired officers at the Bridgetown Heights Police Department must undergo mandatory training on racial justice and public accountability, supervised by an independent third-party monitor. A small step, but one born from fractured trust. And now, genuine efforts to rebuild it. Malcolm Ford's story never made the front pages of national papers, but it spread through every home, diner, and high school classroom in Bridgetown. A living lesson in what it means to wake up, because he didn't just stand up for himself. He stood for those with no voice. And in a world that's often unjust, exactly that is what justice looks like. And if you believe that justice should never depend on skin color, share this story so the light doesn't stop at Bridgetown.